The sound of a slap echoed across the weapons qualification range like a gunshot. 83 pairs of eyes turned toward the small woman who had just hit the concrete floor. Her cheek burned red, already swelling beneath the harsh North Carolina sun. Her technician's cap tumbled away, rolling to a stop against an ammunition crate filled with 5.6 rounds. The morning light caught the oil stains on her uniform, the loose threads at her collar, the dust now coating her knees. Staff Sergeant Damon Vickers stood over her, his hand still raised, palm open. 6 feet 2 inches of muscle and ego wrapped in a ranger instructor's uniform. The combat patch on his shoulder caught the light. 3rd Infantry Division, a badge of honor that should have meant something. Except anyone who bothered to check would find he had never actually deployed with that unit. Never heard a shot fired in anger. Never smelled the copper tang of blood on a battlefield. But nobody bothered to check anymore. Not when your father was a retired 2-star general with friends in every corner of the Pentagon. Not when a single phone call could end careers and ruin lives. The humidity hung thick in the air, mixing with gun oil and the sharp smell of testosterone. Fort Braxton's Joint Tactical Training Complex buzzed with the controlled chaos of an inter-service combat readiness evaluation. Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, various support units. Over 80 personnel gathered for what was supposed to be a routine qualification day. Nobody expected this. I asked you one last time. Vickers' voice carried across the training yard, pitched loud enough to ensure maximum humiliation. Give me the weapon. Reese Thornton pushed herself up from the ground slowly. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. The movements of someone who had learned long ago that sudden motions invited more violence. She said nothing. Just quietly picked up her cap, dusted it off with careful precision, and placed it back on her head. She was 28 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. Her ponytail was messy, practical, the kind that suggested function over fashion. Her uniform was stained with the evidence of honest work. Gun oil, cleaning solvent, the accumulated grime of someone who spent their days elbow deep in weapon systems while others slept. The kind of woman most soldiers looked right through on their way to somewhere more important. Can't talk? Vickers laughed, turning to the crowd of Rangers watching the scene unfold. His audience, his stage, his moment to demonstrate the natural order of things. See this? This is why women don't belong here. Can't even clean a rifle properly. Laughter rippled through the training yard. The nervous kind. The kind that comes from soldiers who know better than to cross a man with connections. The kind that comes from wanting to belong more than wanting to be decent. Reese remained silent, but something made Master Sergeant Isaac Whitmore pause mid-step. He stood in the far corner of the range, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. 22 years in the Army, service with Ranger battalions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Time spent alongside operators whose names never appeared on any official roster. He had seen things, done things, learned to read people the way others read books. And something about this woman wasn't right. He narrowed his gaze, studying the way she stood. Shoulders open, center of gravity low. Hands relaxed at her sides, but not loose, not defeated. Her fingers were slightly curved, positioned for quick movement. Her weight was distributed evenly on the balls of her feet. That stance. He had seen it before, at Coronado, California, at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, the place where they made SEALs, the place where ordinary men either became extraordinary or broke completely. He set his coffee down very carefully and kept watching. The confrontation had started 20 minutes earlier, over a single M4 carbine, over a firing pin that most people would never notice. Reese had been working at her station in the Armory alcove, a small workspace carved out of the larger weapons distribution area. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the racks of rifles awaiting inspection. The smell of Hop's No. 9 solvent hung in the air, familiar as an old friend. She moved through each weapon with mechanical precision. Chamber clear, trigger assembly functional, firing pin condition, barrel wear. The rhythm of inspection was meditation, a way to quiet the noise in her head, a way to forget the things she was trying to forget. Her fingers knew these weapons better than most soldiers ever would. Every spring tension, every worn edge, Every microscopic flaw that could mean the difference between a weapon that fired true and one that jammed at the worst possible moment. She had been at Fort Braxton for 3 years now. 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of keeping her head down, doing her job, avoiding attention. 3 years of watching soldiers come and go, never knowing her name, never caring to learn it. That was the plan. Disappear. Become nobody. Let the past stay buried. It had almost worked. Vickers had arrived with his Rangers at 0700, loud and impatient, demanding weapons for his unit's qualification round. His voice preceded him like a warning siren, arrogant, dismissive, the voice of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Move it, people. We're on a schedule here. Reese had continued her inspections without looking up, methodical, thorough. She pulled an M4 from the rack, worked the charging handle with practiced ease, and held the firing pin up to the light, and stopped. The pin showed asymmetric wear on the tip. Not obvious. Not something a casual inspection would catch. Maybe not something anyone else in this building would catch. But she caught it. She always caught it. Approximately 0.3 millimeters of deviation from factory specifications. Under normal training conditions, it might last another 1,000 rounds. Maybe more. No one would ever know the difference. But these weren't normal training conditions. She had heard Vickers announce it himself that morning, his voice carrying across the yard while she worked. His Rangers were deploying to Syria in 6 weeks. Combat deployment. The real thing. Sand and blood and bullets that didn't care about your father's rank or your own inflated ego. This weapon, with its compromised firing pin, would fail them when they needed it most. Maybe not in the first firefight, maybe not in the first week, but under sustained fire, under the chaos of real combat, the pin would fracture, the weapon would jam, and someone would die. Someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father. She couldn't let that happen. That rifle! Vickers had materialized at her station, snapping his fingers like he was summoning a servant. Now! This one needs replacement parts. Her voice was quiet, professional, the voice of someone stating a simple fact. The firing pin shows irregular wear. 0.3 millimeters of deviation from spec. Under sustained fire, it will fracture within 100 rounds. Probably fewer. Vickers stared at her like she had spoken in tongues. That's within acceptable tolerances. Acceptable for a training weapon that won't see combat. She set the pin down with careful precision, met his eyes without flinching. Your Rangers are deploying to Syria in 6 weeks. You announced it yourself this morning at 0715. Sound carries in this building. Something shifted in his expression. The first flicker of uncertainty. The first crack in the armor of arrogance. This weapon will fail them when they need it most. Her voice remained steady, calm, completely unintimidated. I'm trying to keep your men alive, Staff Sergeant. That was when his hand moved. Fast, brutal. The slap that would echo across the training yard. Colonel Garrett Hollis emerged from the command building during his routine inspection. He was 58 years old with the weathered face of a man who had spent 3 decades in places that didn't officially exist. His service record was classified at levels that most soldiers didn't know were possible. His eyes missed nothing. He stopped when he saw the scene before him. The small woman picking herself up from the concrete. The crowd of silent observers. The staff sergeant standing over her with righteous fury written across his face. What's going on here? Vickers spun around, snapping to attention. The transformation was immediate. Rage to respect in a heartbeat. The practiced mask of a subordinate facing a superior officer. Sir, this technician is refusing to release weapons to my unit. She's delaying our entire training schedule. Being insubordinate. Hollis looked at Reese, studied her for a moment longer than necessary, then looked at the M4 carbine still on her workstation, then back at Reese. Something passed behind his eyes, something that looked almost like recognition, but it vanished before anyone could be certain it was ever there. Handle it, Staff Sergeant. His voice was neutral, measured, giving nothing away. But handle it professionally. We're soldiers, not thugs. He turned and walked away, back toward the command building, back to whatever classified communications awaited him there. But not before glancing back once. Not before his eyes met Reese's for a single weighted moment. She held his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Then the moment passed, and the colonel was gone. Vickers grinned. You heard him. Handle it professionally. The word dripped with mockery. So let's handle this. You're going to give me that weapon. You're going to apologize for wasting my time, and you're going to learn your place around here. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, close enough that his shadow fell across her like a threat. Am I clear? Reese said nothing. She simply returned to her workstation and resumed her inspection of the next weapon in the rack, as if he wasn't there, as if nothing had happened, as if the red mark spreading across her cheek didn't exist. Vickers stared at her back, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw worked, grinding teeth against teeth. He would make her pay for this. He would make her regret ever opening her mouth, ever questioning him, ever existing in his presence. But not here, not now, not with the colonel possibly watching from his window. Later. Soon. The morning progressed with the grinding efficiency of military routine. Trainees cycled through the qualification lanes in groups of 8, their rifle reports creating a staccato rhythm that echoed off the concrete barriers. Brass casings clinked against the ground like metal rain. The smell of cordite hung in the air, sharp and familiar. Vickers prowled the firing line like a predator, his voice a constant bark of criticism and condescension. He had a gift for finding weakness, for exploiting it, for making soldiers feel small so that he could feel large. It was the only way he knew how to lead. Reese worked in the background, invisible to most. Essential to all. She cleared jammed weapons with quiet efficiency, replaced worn components without being asked, ensured that every trainee who stepped up to the line had a functioning rifle in their hands. Her movements were fluid, almost choreographed, each motion flowing into the next with a precision that seemed unconscious. She never looked at Vickers, never acknowledged the whispers that followed her across the yard, never gave any indication that the throbbing in her cheek bothered her at all. But she was watching, always watching. Her eyes tracked every movement, every conversation, every potential threat. The habit of a lifetime. The instinct of someone who had learned that survival depended on seeing danger before it saw you. Specialist Wade Colburn, the unit armorer, had taken to following her with hostile eyes. He was 32 years old, 4 years on the job, proud of his expert rating on 3 weapon platforms. This morning, Reese had flagged 3 of his weapons for replacement. 3 weapons he had personally inspected and approved. 3 weapons that would have gone into combat with American soldiers. Firing pins showed irregular wear patterns, she had said. Nothing more, nothing less. No accusation, no judgment, just facts. But facts could wound deeper than insults. 4 years of his work, questioned by a cleaning lady. That's what they called her when they thought she couldn't hear. The cleaning lady, the grease monkey, the nobody who thought she knew more than soldiers who actually used the weapons she maintained. He would remember this. He would make sure others remembered too. Sergeant First Class Pamela Stokes had been watching Reese since the confrontation. The admin NCO had a face that seemed permanently set in disapproval, lips pressed thin, eyes cold and calculating. She tracked Reese with the kind of attention usually reserved for something unpleasant that needed to be eliminated. I've been trying to get her transferred for weeks, she told Vickers during a break in the qualification rounds. Her voice was low, pitched for privacy. She doesn't follow protocol, questions everything, acts like she's better than everyone else. What do we know about her? Almost nothing. Stokes pulled out her phone, scrolled to a file she had been building. I ran her personnel record this morning. It's practically empty. Basic identification, employment start date, medical clearance. That's it. Vickers' eyes narrowed. Nothing before 3 years ago? Nothing. No prior service record, no education history, no emergency contacts, no next of kin. Stokes paused, letting the implication sink in. It's like she didn't exist before she walked through our gates. A ghost. Or she's hiding something. Or both. Vickers smiled. Cold. Predatory. The smile of a man who had found a weakness to exploit. Keep digging. If she's got skeletons, I want to know about them. I've already submitted a formal inquiry, Requested access to anything sealed or classified. Stokes matched his smile with one of her own. If there's dirt, we'll find it. From 50 yards away, Reese continued her work. Her hands moved across the weapon she was cleaning, steady and sure. But the set of her shoulders had changed. Slightly, almost imperceptibly, she knew she was being watched. She always knew. And she knew that whatever protection anonymity had offered was starting to crumble. Sergeant Faye Pemberton found Reese at her station during the lunch break. The supply NCO was 42 years old, with 12 years of service and the kind of eyes that had seen enough to know when something didn't add up. She approached quietly, not wanting to startle, not wanting to add to whatever burden this woman was already carrying. "You okay?" Reese looked up from her work. For just a moment, something human flickered behind her guarded expression. A crack in the armor, a glimpse of the person hiding behind the mask. Then it was gone. "I'm fine, Sergeant." "That mark on your face says different." Faye kept her voice low. The yard was emptier now, but ears were everywhere. "That's assault. You know that, right? You could report him. He's got connections." Reese's voice was flat, matter of fact, the voice of someone stating obvious truth. "Friends in high places, father's a general, you know how it works." "I know how it's supposed to work. I know that doesn't always match reality." Faye leaned against the workbench, keeping her posture casual, non-threatening. "I've been in this army a long time, seen a lot of guys like him come and go. They always think they're untouchable. They usually find out different. Usually takes years." Reese resumed her inspection, hands moving automatically. "Careers get destroyed in the meantime. People get hurt. By the time justice catches up, the damage is done. So you're just going to take it? Let him treat you like that." Reese was quiet for a moment. Her fingers paused on the weapon she was cleaning. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost sad. "I've taken worse, Sergeant, from people who were actually trying to kill me." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Faye studied her colleague's profile, the faint scar that traced along her jawline, thin and white, the kind that came from something sharp, the calluses on her hands that seemed too thick for someone who just cleaned weapons, the way her eyes constantly scanned the environment, cataloging threats, even while her hands worked. "Where'd you serve?" The question came out before she could stop it, before she could think better of asking. Reese's hands stilled, just for a moment, a hesitation so brief that anyone else would have missed it entirely. "I'm just a technician." Her voice was carefully neutral, practiced. "Started here 3 years ago. Nothing special." But Faye Pemberton had been a supply NCO for 12 years. She knew how to read inventory manifests and personnel files and the lies that people told themselves. She knew how to spot the things they tried to hide. And everything about Reese Thornton screamed that nothing special was the biggest lie she had ever heard. Private Logan Hendricks found Reese later that afternoon. He was 22 years old, desperate to prove himself, the kind of soldier who attached himself to power like a remora to a shark, feeding on scraps of authority and reflected glory. He had been following Vickers around all day, laughing at every joke, nodding at every command, the perfect subordinate, willing to do anything to climb the ladder, willing to hurt anyone who got in the way. He shoved a cart of empty magazines toward her station. Hard. The metal cart caught her hip, sent her stumbling sideways. "Oops." His smile was ugly, mean, the smile of a small man trying to feel large. "Maybe you should watch where you're standing, cleaning lady." Reese stumbled, but she didn't fall. Her foot slid back in a lateral pivot, her weight redistributed with fluid grace. Her balance recovered in a fraction of a second, so smoothly that most observers would have written it off as luck. But Master Sergeant Whitmore didn't write it off. He saw the movement from 30 yards away, and his blood ran cold. That wasn't a stumble recovery. That was a trained response, a specific, deliberate movement that he had seen before. The kind of thing they drilled into you until it became reflex, until your body moved before your conscious mind could interfere. He had seen that exact movement at Coronado during BUDS, the basic underwater demolition just chasse SEAL course that broke 90% of the men who attempted it. He pulled out his phone and sent a text message to a contact he hadn't used in years, a former teammate, A man who now worked in Naval Special Warfare Command with access to databases that didn't officially exist. The message was simple. Need a favor. Background check. Urgent. Reese Thornton. Weapons technician. Fort Braxton. The response came back in under a minute. On it. Give me an hour. Whitmore pocketed his phone and kept watching. Something was happening here. Something that went beyond a simple personality conflict, and he intended to find out what. The afternoon brought heat and humidity that pressed down on the training yard like a physical weight. Soldiers stripped to their undershirts. Water consumption doubled. Tempers shortened. But the real storm was still building. It broke at precisely 1637. A young soldier at Lane 3, 19 years old, green as grass. First time on a qualification range. His hands were shaking so badly that the M4 trembled in his grip like a living thing. He had somehow managed to chamber a live round while his weapon was pointed away from the range, away from the targets, toward the crowd of soldiers gathered behind the firing line, toward 63 people. The negligent discharge was deafening. The bullet punched through the ceiling of the covered firing station, sending chunks of concrete raining down like hail. Screams erupted. Soldiers dove for cover. Instructors shouted contradictory orders that no one could hear over the ringing in their ears. The young soldier stood frozen, weapon still in his trembling hands, barrel sweeping across the crowd as he turned, confused, terrified. His finger was still on the trigger. The magazine was still loaded. One more twitch, one more spasm of fear, and people would die. Colonel Hollis stood directly in the line of fire, 20 feet away, center mass, a perfect target. Time seemed to slow. The chaos around them faded to a distant roar. The screaming, the running, the desperate scramble for safety. All of it became background noise. Reese moved. She covered the 15 feet between her station and Lane 3 in under 2 seconds. Her movement was explosive, silent, the kind of speed that shouldn't be possible from a standing start. The kind of speed that came from somewhere beyond normal human performance. Her hand closed over the rifle's barrel, pushing it toward the ground, firm but not violent, controlling the weapon without startling the soldier into pulling the trigger. Her grip was precise, calculated, the grip of someone who had done this before. Her other hand found the magazine release. The magazine dropped free, clattering against the concrete. Her palm slapped the bolt catch, locking the action open. She cleared the chamber by touch alone. Her eyes never left the terrified trainee's face. The live round that had been waiting to kill someone pinged off the floor and rolled away into the dust. "You're okay." Her voice cut through his panic like a knife through fog. Calm, steady, absolutely certain. "Weapons safe. Everyone's safe. You're going to be fine. Just breathe." 1.4 seconds. That's how long the entire sequence had taken. From the moment she started moving to the moment the weapon was cleared. 1.4 seconds to prevent a massacre. The silence that followed was absolute. 83 people, and not a single sound. Not a breath. Not a whisper. Just the ringing in their ears and the pounding of their hearts. Master Sergeant Whitmore's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. His hands were shaking. Not from fear of what had almost happened. From recognition of what he had just witnessed. He had been a ranger for 22 years. Served alongside some of the finest special operators in the world. Delta Force. SEAL teams. The kinds of men who move through violence like fish through water. He had never seen anyone move that fast. Beside him, Command Sergeant Major Elijah Warren had gone very still. The color had drained from his face. "Isaac," his voice was barely audible. "Did you see that?" "I saw it. That wasn't basic training. That wasn't even advanced infantry school." "I know. That was operator level, tier 1, response time, instinct, muscle memory, everything." Whitmore nodded slowly. His phone buzzed again. This time he pulled it out. Read the message from his contact at Naval Special Warfare Command. His blood turned to ice. "Who the hell is she?" Warren asked. Whitmore stared at his phone, at the words on the screen, at the revelation that changed everything. "I don't know yet," he lied, "but I intend to find out." He pocketed the phone, kept his face neutral, but his mind was racing. The file was classified. locked behind walls that even his contact couldn't fully penetrate. But enough had leaked through. Enough to confirm what he had suspected. Reese Thornton was not who she claimed to be, and whatever she was hiding, it was big enough to require level 5 security clearance to access, the kind of clearance that protected assets, operations, things that weren't supposed to exist. Damon Vickers saw none of this, understood none of this. He saw only an opportunity to regain control, to reassert dominance, to punish the woman who had embarrassed him. He stormed across the range, his face purple with fury. "Who gave you permission to touch that trainee?" His voice cracked like a whip. "Who gave you permission to handle a weapon malfunction? You're a technician. You maintain equipment. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be." Reese straightened to face him. Her expression was neutral, patient, the way one might look at a storm that was already beginning to pass. The weapon was pointed at 63 people, staff sergeant, including 3 officers and the base commander. For the first time, Vickers registered that Colonel Hollis had been standing in the line of fire, that he had been seconds away from taking a round to the chest, that Reese had just saved his life. The colonel stood on the observation platform now, watching. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on Reese with an intensity that suggested he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. "I don't care if it was pointed at the president himself." Vickers stepped closer, lowering his voice to a hiss that only she could hear. "You do not step outside your lane. Ever. You do not make me look bad in front of my men. You do not exist except when I say you exist. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Staff Sergeant." The words were compliant. The tone was not, and everyone within earshot heard the difference. Reese turned and walked back to her station, unhurried, unintimidated. She pulled out a tactical flashlight, military spec, aircraft-grade aluminum housing, and resumed inspecting the weapon she had been working on before the incident. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. Her focus was absolute, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just moved faster than humanly possible, as if the fury radiating from Vickers was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Colonel Hollis descended from the observation platform. His stride was measured, deliberate. The walk of a man who was processing new information. He stopped beside Reese's workstation, close enough to speak privately, far enough to maintain the appearance of professional distance. "That was impressive." His voice was low, meant for her ears only. "I've been in the military for 35 years, commanded men in 3 different wars. I've never seen anyone move like that." Reese didn't look up from her work. "Instinct, sir. Training. Nothing special." "Training?" He let the word hang in the air, weighted with skepticism. "What kind of training produces reflexes like that? The kind that keeps you alive when everything goes wrong?" Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them. An acknowledgement, a recognition of shared experience. The understanding of 2 people who had seen the worst that humanity had to offer and survived it. "Coronado," Hollis said quietly. It wasn't a question. Reese's hands stilled, just for a heartbeat, then resumed their work. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Of course you don't." He studied her for a moment longer. The scars she couldn't quite hide, the calluses that told their own story, the way she held herself, even now, even here, like someone who was always ready for violence. "Carry on, technician." He walked away, back toward the command building, but his mind was already working, already pulling strings, already accessing channels that existed outside normal military hierarchy. Reese Thornton, weapons technician, Fort Braxton. He would know her story by morning. Night fell over Fort Braxton like a curtain closing on the first act of a play. The training yard emptied. The weapon racks were secured. The fluorescent lights hummed their lonely song to empty corridors. Reese sat alone in her quarters, a small room in the support staff building, sparse, functional. The kind of room that said nothing about the person who lived there. That was intentional. She held a challenge coin in her palm, old, worn smooth by years of handling. On its face, the trident of the Navy SEALs. On its back, a single word etched in letters that were starting to fade. Hawk, Callum Brennan, her teammate, her brother in arms. The man who had given his life so that she could escape from a compound in Raqqa. The man whose face still haunted her dreams. She closed her eyes and let the memories come. She had fought them for so long, buried them so deep, but tonight, alone in the darkness, she let them surface. Syria, 2019, a compound on the outskirts of Raqqa. The mission had gone wrong from the first moment. Bad intelligence, an ambush waiting. Her team had walked into a kill zone that should have been a rescue operation. She remembered the chaos, the muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness, the screams of wounded operators, the radio crackling with desperate calls for extraction that wouldn't come. She remembered Hawk grabbing her arm, pulling her toward the exit, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Go! I'll cover you. I'm not leaving you. That's an order, Phoenix." His eyes were steady, calm, already accepting what was about to happen. Get the team out. That's what matters. That's all that matters. She remembered running, remembered the sound of his rifle behind her, holding back the darkness. Remembered the moment when the firing stopped. She remembered turning back, seeing him fall, seeing the building collapse around him in a cloud of dust and fire and screaming metal. She remembered calling his name, screaming it, knowing he couldn't hear her, knowing he was gone. The bullet hit her 3 seconds later, punched through her chest, collapsed her lung, dropped her in the rubble like a puppet with cut strings. She should have died there, would have died there, if not for the training that took over when conscious thought failed. 9 hours. She had held her position for 9 hours, alone, bleeding, barely breathing, killing 17 enemy fighters who came to finish her off. Waiting for extraction that finally came at dawn, they told her she was a hero, gave her a Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, a medical discharge that ended her career and started her exile. They never found Hawk's body. She hadn't been a hero. She had been a survivor. And surviving when someone you loved didn't felt less like victory and more like punishment. Reese opened her eyes. The coin was warm in her palm. The memories were cold in her heart. 3 years. 3 years of trying to disappear. 3 years of pretending to be nobody. 3 years of running from who she had been and what she had failed to do. Tomorrow, Damon Vickers would come for her again. She knew it as surely as she knew her own heartbeat. He wouldn't stop until he had proven something, until he had broken her, until he had restored the pride she had wounded by being better than him. He didn't know what he was dealing with. None of them did. But tomorrow they would begin to understand. She set the coin on her bedside table and lay back on her narrow bunk. Sleep would come eventually. It always did. And with it, the dreams that waited. Dreams of fire. Dreams of falling. Dreams of a voice calling her name in the darkness. Hold on, Phoenix. Just hold on. But there was no one left to hold on to. Not anymore. Outside her window, the stars wheeled slowly overhead. The same stars that had watched over 1,000 battlefields. The same stars that had witnessed 1,000 stories of loss and sacrifice and survival. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new tests, new opportunities for the truth to surface. Reese Thornton closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know that in the hours ahead, everything she had tried to bury would come roaring back to life. She didn't know that her past was about to catch up with her in ways she never could have imagined. But she would learn, very soon. The easy days were over. Morning arrived at Fort Braxton with the weight of unfinished business. The sun climbed over the tree line at 0600, painting the training yards in shades of gold and amber. The air was already thick with humidity, promising another punishing day. Reese reached her workstation 30 minutes before her shift began. The weapon racks stood in silent rows, waiting for inspection. The fluorescent lights buzzed their eternal song. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Everything except the crowd gathering at the edge of the training yard. She felt their eyes on her as she worked. Dozens of soldiers, drifting in from the barracks and the mess hall, finding reasons to linger near the armory alcove. Word had spread overnight, the way it always did on military bases. The cleaning lady who moved like lightning. The technician who had cleared a weapon malfunction faster than anyone had ever seen. The nobody who had embarrassed Staff Sergeant Vickers in front of his own men. The story had grown in the telling. By breakfast, she had disarmed 3 soldiers simultaneously. By mid-morning, she had caught a live round in midair. The truth was strange enough, but truth never survived contact with bored soldiers in empty hours. Reese ignored them all. Her hands moved across the weapons with practiced ease. Chamber clear, trigger assembly functional, firing pin within specifications. The rhythm of inspection was meditation, a way to quiet the noise in her head. But the noise wouldn't stay quiet today. Damon Vickers arrived at 0745 with his entourage in tow. Logan Hendricks walked 2 steps behind, eager and vicious. Wade Colburn brought up the rear, his expert armorer's badge gleaming on his chest like a challenge. Pamela Stokes watched from the administrative building, phone pressed to her ear, eyes tracking Reese's every movement. They had been planning something. Reese could see it in the way they moved, the barely contained anticipation, the sidelong glances, the smiles that promised pain. She kept working. Whatever was coming, she would face it the same way she faced everything else. Head down, hands steady. Heart silent. The crowd had grown to nearly 60 soldiers by the time Vickers made his move. Rangers, Marines, support staff, all gathered for the morning's qualification rounds, all watching, all waiting for blood. Vickers approached her station with theatrical slowness. His boots struck the concrete with deliberate weight. His shadow fell across her workbench like a threat. "Well, well," his voice carried across the yard, pitched for maximum audience. "If it isn't our resident hero, the cleaning lady who thinks she's special." Reese didn't look up. Her fingers continued their inspection of the M4 in her hands. Bolt carrier group, cam pin, firing pin, retaining pin. "I heard an interesting story this morning." Vickers circled her workstation like a shark. "Apparently, you think you know more about weapons than soldiers who actually use them. More than armorers with years of experience and expert ratings." Wade Colburn stepped forward on cue. His face was twisted with wounded pride. "She flagged 3 of my weapons yesterday. Said the firing pins showed irregular wear patterns. I've been doing this job for 4 years. 4 years of expert ratings. And some grease monkey thinks she can tell me my business." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sympathetic murmurs. Soldiers closing ranks against an outsider who had dared to challenge one of their own. Reese set down the weapon she was inspecting, met Colburn's eyes with an expression that revealed nothing. The pins showed 0.3 millimeter deviation from factory specifications. Under sustained automatic fire, they would fracture within 100 rounds. "Your Rangers are deploying to combat in 6 weeks." Her voice was calm, professional. "I wasn't questioning your competence. I was trying to keep them alive." "Trying to keep them alive?" Vickers laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. "Listen to this. The janitor has opinions about combat readiness now." More laughter from the crowd. Nervous, obligatory, the kind that comes from wanting to please someone with power. "So here's what we're going to do." Vickers gestured expansively, playing to his audience. "We're going to settle this once and for all. A little competition. Your skills against Colburn's. Loser admits they don't know what they're talking about." He paused for effect. "Let the anticipation build. Disassembly competition. Standard M4 field strip and reassembly. First one to present a function-checked weapon wins." The crowd pressed closer. The scent of blood was in the air. Everyone loved watching someone get humiliated, especially someone who had dared to stand out. Reese looked at the weapon on her workbench, then at Colburn, cracking his knuckles with theatrical confidence, then at the crowd of faces, hungry for entertainment. She could refuse. Walk away. Let them have their victory and their stories. That was the smart play, the safe play, the play that kept her invisible. But something had shifted inside her since yesterday, since the moment she had moved without thinking to save 63 lives. Since Colonel Hollis had looked at her with recognition in his eyes. Some mass, once cracked, couldn't be repaired. "Fine." A space was cleared in the center of the training yard. 2 M4 carbines were placed on a table, identical in every way. Colburn took his position with the swagger of a man who had already won. Reese stood opposite, her expression blank as a sheet of ice. "Standard disassembly and reassembly," Vickers announced. First one to present a function-checked weapon wins. Ready? Colburn nodded, rolled his shoulders, made a show of loosening up. Reese said nothing. Go. Colburn's hands moved with practiced efficiency, the movements of a man who had performed this task thousands of times. Take down, pin out, pivot, pin out. Upper receiver separated from lower, bolt carrier group extracted, firing pin removed, charging handle cleared. His fingers flew, muscle memory taking over. 4 years of training compressed into a single fluid sequence. 47 seconds. He slapped the charging handle home, pointed the weapon at the ground, pulled the trigger. Click. Function check complete. Done. He looked up, triumph blazing across his face. Then he saw where everyone else was looking. Reese stood motionless. Her weapon was already reassembled, already function checked. Resting on the table in front of her. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow and even. Her hands hung relaxed at her sides. She hadn't just beaten him. She had beaten him with her eyes closed. Time, someone whispered. The voice was hushed, awed. Master Sergeant Whitmore checked his watch. His voice came out strangled. 12 seconds. The silence was absolute. 12 seconds, with her eyes closed. A task that took expert armorers nearly a minute, and she had done it in 12 seconds without even looking. That's impossible, Colburn's voice cracked. No one can... I've seen instructors who can't... She didn't even look. The voice belonged to Specialist Emma Brooks, a young trainee who had been watching Reese since yesterday's incident. She did the whole thing with her eyes closed. Vickers' face had gone a dangerous shade of red. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. His perfect plan had just turned to ash in his mouth. Lucky. He finally managed the word, forced it out through clenched teeth. That's all that was. Some kind of trick. Reese opened her eyes, met his gaze with calm indifference. Would you like me to do it again? The question hung in the air like a challenge, like a gauntlet thrown at his feet, like everything he feared and hated, wrapped in the quiet voice of a woman half his size. Vickers' hands clenched into fists, his nostrils flared. For a moment, it seemed like he might strike her again, right there in front of everyone. But Colonel Hollis had appeared on the observation platform, watching, waiting, his presence a silent warning that some things had consequences. Anybody can play with parts. Vickers spat the words like they tasted bitter. Let's see if you can actually shoot. He snatched a Beretta M9 from the nearest rack, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber with unnecessary force, thrust the weapon toward Reese like an accusation. Firing range, 50 yards, standard qualification course. Reese looked at the pistol in his outstretched hand, then at the range beyond, where paper targets waited at precisely measured distances. I'm not qualified for weapons discharge on this facility. I'll qualify you. Vickers shoved the weapon into her hands. Right now. Move! The crowd followed like a tide drawn by the moon. Even personnel from other units drifted over, sensing spectacle. By the time they reached the pistol range, nearly 70 people had gathered. Reese approached the firing line with measured steps. She loaded the magazine, chambered around, raised the weapon in a textbook Weaver stance, arms extended, weight balanced, everything by the book. But something was wrong. Her right hand trembled slightly, a barely perceptible vibration that anyone looking closely could see. Her grip seemed uncertain. Her stance looked stiff. What's the matter? Logan Hendricks called out from the crowd. Scared of a little bang? Reese adjusted her grip, steadied her breathing, and fired. The first round hit 6 inches left of the target center. The second went high. The third scattered wide. By the fifth shot, her grouping was spread across a 2-foot radius. Not a single round touched center mass. Laughter erupted from the crowd. This is priceless. Colburn's humiliation was forgotten in the joy of watching someone else fail. Fastest disassembly I've ever seen, and she can't hit the broadside of a barn. Technician accuracy, Vickers smirked. All theory, no practice. Maybe stick to what you know, sweetheart. Logan Hendricks was practically dancing. Should have stayed in the kitchen. But Master Sergeant Whitmore wasn't laughing. His eyes had moved past the 50-yard target, past the 75-yard marker, past the 100-yard line. all the way to the 200-yard target at the far end of the range. 5 holes, grouped so tightly they nearly touched, arranged in a perfect pentagon. Holy God! The words escaped him in a breath. Staff Sergeant Blake Ortiz followed his gaze. The color drained from his face. She wasn't missing. His voice was barely audible. She was shooting a different target. Whitmore did the math in his head. 200 yards, iron sights only, a pistol designed for maximum accuracy at 25 yards. And she had put 5 rounds into a pattern that Olympic marksmen would struggle to match, with a weapon she had never fired before, on a range she had never used, while pretending to fail. "Who does that?" Ortiz asked. "Someone who wanted us to know she could." Whitmore's voice was grim. "Someone who's been hiding what she is, and someone who just decided to let us see." The laughter died as others began to notice where they were looking. One by one, heads turned. Murmurs replaced mockery. Confusion replaced contempt. Vickers' smirk faltered. "What? What is everyone looking at?" A Marine gunnery sergeant named Connor Byron walked slowly to the 200-yard marker. He stared at the target for a long moment, then turned to face the crowd. 5 rounds, 200 yards, pentagon grouping. His voice carried across the range like a verdict. "I've seen Marine Scout snipers who couldn't do that with a rifle. She did it with a pistol, while making us think she was missing." The silence that followed was deafening. "She missed," Vickers insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. "She clearly missed. She hit exactly what she was aiming at." Whitmore stepped forward. "The question is why she bothered to make it look like she missed at first." Reese ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, set the weapon down on the bench. "May I return to my station now? I have work to do." But Vickers wasn't finished. He couldn't be finished. Everything he believed about himself had been built on being superior. The biggest, the strongest, the most dangerous man in any room. And this woman had just demolished that belief in front of everyone who mattered. He couldn't let that stand. "Not so fast." His voice had changed, lower, darker. "Anybody can shoot paper. Let's see how you handle actual combat." He gestured toward the close-quarters combat training area, a sand-filled pit surrounded by concrete barriers, the place where soldiers learned to fight without weapons, the place where size and strength usually determine victory. "Basic defensive techniques. I'll demonstrate. She'll be my training partner." Training partner. Everyone knew what that really meant. Reese looked at the pit, then at Vickers, already stripping off his blouse, rolling his shoulders. "Staff Sergeant, I don't think—" "That's an order." His voice cracked like a whip. "Unless you want to refuse a direct order in front of the base commander." Colonel Hollis stood on the observation platform watching. His face betrayed nothing. Reese held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once and walked toward the pit. The crowd pressed close. Phone cameras appeared. The energy had shifted from mockery to something darker. Something that smelled like violence waiting to happen. Reese stepped into the pit, stood in a neutral stance, hands at her sides, face empty of expression, waiting. Vickers circled her, predator and prey, the biggest game he had ever hunted. "First technique." His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "What to do when someone grabs you from behind." He moved fast, faster than necessary, his arm wrapped around her throat from behind. A chokehold, the kind that could kill if held long enough, already too tight for training. "In a real situation, you'd be dead already." His breath was hot against her ear, his arm constricted tighter. "But let's pretend you have time to react. What would you do?" Reese didn't answer. "Nothing to say?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe you should tap out. Admit you're in over your head." Still nothing. But Whitmore noticed something the others missed. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her pulse remained steady. She wasn't panicking. She was waiting. "Fine." Vickers shifted his grip, prepared to take her to the ground. "Let me show everyone what happens when you freeze in combat." Reese moved. Her elbow drove backward into his solar plexus, just hard enough to create space. Her hips dropped and rotated. Her center of gravity shifted beneath his. One hand caught his wrist, the other pressed against his elbow. Leverage against mass, physics against muscle. And suddenly Damon Vickers was airborne. He flew over her shoulder, spun through the air, landed flat on his back in the sand with a thud that drove the breath from his lungs. 1.4 seconds, start to finish. Reese released him immediately, stepped back to her neutral position, stood there as if nothing had happened. The silence was absolute. Logan Hendricks started. Shut up. The words came from Whitmore. Sharp, final. Vickers scrambled to his feet, face crimson, hands shaking. Lucky throw. His voice cracked. Let's go again. He charged at her. No technique, no training, just blind fury. His fist swung toward her face. Reese's head slipped to the side. The blow missed by millimeters. Her hand caught his wrist, redirected his momentum, and suddenly he was past her, stumbling, off balance. She didn't pursue, just returned to her neutral stance and waited. Come on, Vickers spun. Fight back. Stop running. I'm not running, Staff Sergeant. Her voice was calm. I'm defending. There's a difference. He came at her again. Faster, more desperate. A combination of strikes designed to overwhelm. Reese flowed around them like water, redirecting, deflecting, never retaliating. She was toying with him. Everyone could see it now. Logan Hendricks saw his mentor being humiliated, saw everything he believed in crumbling, and decided to intervene. He launched himself at Reese from behind. She heard him coming. Without turning, she stepped aside, caught his arm, used his momentum against him, sent him sprawling face first into the sand. Now she faced both of them, Vickers in front, Hendricks scrambling up behind. They exchanged a glance, a silent agreement. They attacked together. Reese dropped low. Her legs swept Hendricks' feet while her arm blocked Vickers' strike. She rose like a wave, flowing past Hendricks' falling body. In under 10 seconds, both men were on the ground, breathing hard, unable to land a single clean hit, and Reese hadn't thrown a single offensive strike. Enough! Colonel Hollis's voice cracked across the pit. Everyone froze. He descended from the platform. His face was carved from stone. Staff Sergeant Vickers. Explain yourself. Vickers struggled upright. Sand coated his uniform. Blood trickled from a split lip. Sir, I was conducting a training demonstration. What I saw was an instructor attacking a civilian staff member. What I saw was a coordinated assault by 2 soldiers on a single unarmed woman. Sir, she defended herself without causing injury to either of you, which is more than you deserve. Hollis stepped closer. Report to my office, now. Yes, sir. The words came out broken. As Vickers trudged away, Hendricks limping behind, Hollis turned to Reese. Are you injured? No, sir. Good. He paused. That was Krav Maga, combined with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and something else I don't recognize. I've picked up things here and there, sir. Here and there. He nodded slowly. Of course you have. He walked away. But stopped after 3 steps. Turned back. After what happened yesterday, I submitted a request to unlock your personnel file. The request was approved this morning. His voice dropped. I know who you are, Senior Chief. The words hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Senior Chief, the second highest enlisted rank in the Navy, a rank that took decades to achieve. I know about Coronado, about SEAL Team 4, about 9 deployments and 47 operations. Hollis continued. I know about the Bronze Star with Valor, the 3 Purple Hearts. Gas rippled through the crowd. And I know about Operation Serpent Dawn, Raqqa, 2019. The name settled over the crowd like a shroud. Some recognized it. The classified operation whispered about in intelligence circles. Never confirmed, never denied. You held a position for 9 hours under continuous enemy fire. With a bullet in your lung, you killed 17 enemy combatants, and you're the only reason 12 Americans made it home that day. Reese stood motionless. The secret she had protected for 3 years, stripped away in seconds. Vickers had stopped walking. He turned slowly. His face was the color of ash. He had assaulted a Navy SEAL. He had mocked a war hero. He had tried to humiliate someone who had done more for her country in one day than he would do in his entire career. Around them, hands began to rise, one by one, then in waves, every soldier in sight snapping to attention, saluting. Master Sergeant Whitmore's voice cut through the silence. Senior Chief on deck. The words echoed across the training yard. The recognition she had fled from for 3 years, given freely by strangers who finally understood what they were looking at. Consider your career over, Staff Sergeant. Hollis's voice was quiet, final. MPs, escort him to detention. 2 military police officers appeared. Their faces were carefully neutral as they took positions beside Vickers. This isn't, he found his voice. You can't. I can, and I am. As they led him away, his legs seemed to fail. The MPs had to support his weight. Logan Hendricks was next, still sitting in the sand when MPs approached. Private First Class Hendricks, you're under arrest for assault on a senior NCO. I didn't know. The words tumbled out in panic. I didn't know who she was. That, Reese said quietly, is precisely the problem. Everyone turned to look at her. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody. Her voice carried across the silent yard. But I was never the problem. Your behavior was the problem, and it would have been just as wrong if I actually was just a maintenance technician. The words hung in the air. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's rank. Every person on this base, every technician, every cook, every clerk, they all volunteered to serve. They all deserve dignity. Specialist Emma Brooks wiped her eyes. Sergeant Faye Pemberton stood straighter. Wade Colburn stared at his hands, shame written across his face. Colonel Hollis stepped forward. Senior Chief Thornton, on behalf of everyone here, I apologize for what you've endured. No apology necessary, Colonel. But there are changes that need to happen. Name them. Every support staff member should be treated with the same respect afforded to combat personnel. Zero tolerance for harassment, regardless of the victim's role. Done. And Colonel? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Someone might want to update the personnel database. Having a senior chief listed as maintenance technician grade 3 is going to cause paperwork problems. Despite everything, several people laughed. Hollis smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him. I'll handle it personally. His expression grew serious. And Senior Chief, we need to talk. Privately. Tonight. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. This wasn't just about what had happened today. Of course, sir. He walked away. The crowd began to disperse, still processing. Still coming to terms with everything they had witnessed. Faye Pemberton approached Reese, wrapped her arms around her. I knew, her voice was thick, I knew there was something special about you. Reese returned the embrace. For the first time since the confrontation began, her composure cracked. You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, Faye. That means more than you know. When they separated, Faye's eyes were bright. You could have put them in the hospital. You held back. They weren't enemies, just fools. Reese glanced toward detention. Their careers are over. That's punishment enough. More than they deserve. Maybe, but I didn't join the military to hurt people. I joined to protect them, even from themselves. The afternoon sun climbed higher. The drama gave way to quiet. Soldiers returned to their duties. Their conversations hushed, their eyes following Reese whenever she passed. She returned to her workstation, picked up the weapon she had been cleaning, let her hands find the familiar rhythm. But nothing was familiar anymore. She was no longer invisible, no longer nobody. She was Senior Chief Reese Thornton, SEAL Team 4, Phoenix. And whatever came next, she would face it the same way she had faced everything else, with her head up, her hands steady, and her heart ready for whatever the world demanded. The sun had set over Fort Braxton by the time Colonel Hollis summoned Reese to his office. The base had settled into its evening rhythm. Soldiers drifted toward the mess hall and barracks. The training yard stood empty under pools of artificial light. The day's revelations had spread through every corner of the installation, passed from mouth to mouth like sacred scripture. Reese walked through the quiet corridors of the command building. Her footsteps echoed against polished floors. Soldiers she passed stopped to salute, some with respect, some with awe, some with the particular reverence reserved for those who had done things beyond ordinary comprehension. She returned each salute with crisp precision, but her mind was elsewhere, fixed on the weight she had heard in Hollis's voice when he asked to speak privately. This was about more than today. She knew it in her bones. Hollis's office was austere and functional. Maps covered one wall. Commendations covered another. A single photograph sat on his desk, faded with age, showing a younger Hollis standing with a group of men in desert camouflage. The unit patches were visible. Special Operations Command. He had been one of them once, long before the rank and the desk and the politics. Close the door. His voice was tired, heavy. Sit down. She did as instructed. The chair was hard. Everything in this room was hard. I received a phone call 30 minutes ago. Hollis folded his hands on the desk. From someone whose name I'm not authorized to know, using a line that doesn't officially exist, about a matter that will never appear in any official record. Reese felt her pulse quicken. Her hands remained steady in her lap, but something cold was spreading through her chest. They asked about you specifically, by your call sign. He met her eyes. Phoenix. The name hung in the air, heavy with meaning, heavy with memory. What did they want? Hollis reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a secure satellite phone. Military grade, encrypted beyond anything commercially available. They want to talk to you. He slid the phone across the desk. Now! Reese stared at the device. Her reflection stared back, distorted in the black screen. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of being nobody. And now this. She picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was female, heavily modulated, electronically distorted beyond recognition. Phoenix, welcome back. Reese's throat tightened. Who is this? A friend, an old colleague. It doesn't matter. A pause. We've been watching your progress, the Wounded Warrior program, the maintenance work, the incident today. You've been surveilling me. We've been waiting for you. There's a difference. Reese glanced at Hollis. His face revealed nothing. He had heard this voice before. He knew what was coming. What do you want? We have a mission, one that requires your specific skill set. I'm retired, medical discharge. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. Even if it concerns Hawk. The name hit her like a bullet to the chest. The room tilted. The walls closed in. The air turned to glass in her lungs. Hawk, Callum Brennan, the man who had died saving her life, the man whose challenge coin she had carried every day for 3 years. Hawk is dead. The words came out strangled. KIA Raqqa. I saw him fall. You saw him fall? The voice softened, almost kind. You didn't see him die. He's alive, Phoenix. We have confirmation as of 72 hours ago. The room spun. Reese grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. That's impossible. We have satellite imagery, signal intercepts, human intelligence from assets on the ground. A pause. He's being held at a facility near the Syrian-Iraqi border. Has been for approximately 18 months. Before that, he was moved between various locations. We believe he was captured during the assault on the Raqqa compound. Wounded but alive. 3 years. He had been alive for 3 years, while she mourned, while she blamed herself, while she tried to bury the memory of watching him fall. Why are you telling me this? Because we're mounting a recovery operation, and we want you on the team. Reese closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw the compound in Raqqa, the muzzle flashes, the smoke and fire. Hawk grabbing her arm, pushing her toward the exit. Go, I'll cover you. I'm not leaving you. That's an order, Phoenix. Get the team out. She had obeyed that order, had run while he stayed behind, had survived while he fell, and now he was alive. When? Briefing is at 0500. Transport will pick you up at 0430. The voice paused. He sent you a message, Phoenix. 6 months ago, one of our assets made brief contact with the prisoner. He gave her something to deliver. Reese's hand tightened on the phone. What message? He said, tell Phoenix the easy days are over. The words hit her like a wave, like coming home, like everything she had lost suddenly finding its way back. Their private code, the thing he said before every mission, the words that meant it was time to stop pretending and start fighting. He was alive, and he was waiting for her. I'll be ready. Her voice was steady now, the voice of a senior chief, the voice of Phoenix. 0430. Outstanding. Welcome back to the fight. Shepard out. The line went dead. Reese set the phone down and looked at Hollis. The colonel was watching her with an expression caught between sympathy and respect. "You knew." It wasn't a question. "I suspected." Hollis reached into his desk and withdrew something small and metallic. A challenge coin. He slid it across to her. "I'm the one who signed the order sending your team into that compound. I read the classified after-action reports. When they told me Hawk's body was never recovered, I had this made." Reese picked up the coin. It was identical to the one she carried. Same design, same weight. But on the back, where hers was blank, this one bore a single word. Hawk. "I've carried it for 3 years." Hollis's voice was rough, waiting for confirmation, hoping I was wrong to hope. "And now we bring him home." Hollis nodded slowly. "There's a helicopter waiting on pad 7. Transport to a secure facility where you'll meet your team. 2 operators. Call signs Ghost and Wraith. From a unit that doesn't exist." Reese stood. The coin was warm in her hand. "Colonel, thank you." "Don't thank me yet." His voice hardened. "This is a black operation. No official sanction, no backup, no extraction if things go wrong. If you're captured or killed, the government will deny any knowledge of your existence." "I understand." "Do you?" He leaned forward. "You've been out of the game for 3 years. Your body isn't what it was, and you're walking into hostile territory against unknown forces to rescue a man who might not even be able to walk." Reese met his gaze without flinching. "Then I'll carry him." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, recognition, the acknowledgement of one warrior to another. "Get moving, Senior Chief. You've got a long night ahead." She turned toward the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. "Colonel." "Yes?" "The easy days are over." She smiled. "Time to go to work." The helicopter was a modified Black Hawk, stripped of identifying markings. Reese climbed aboard at 0432 and found 2 figures already waiting. Ghost and Wraith, faces hidden behind balaclavas, eyes hard and empty. The eyes of men who had done things that couldn't be undone. They didn't introduce themselves, just nodded once and returned to checking their weapons. Reese understood. Words were unnecessary among their kind. She found a seat and strapped in as the rotors spun up. Through the open door, Fort Braxton shrank in the distance, the place where she had hidden for 3 years. That life was over now. Phoenix was rising. The flight took 11 hours with 2 refueling stops. Reese spent it reviewing mission parameters on a secure tablet. Guard schedules, patrol patterns, structural weaknesses. The facility was small, buildings surrounded by a makeshift wall. Guard towers at each corner. Approximately 40 enemy personnel. The target was in the main building, 2nd floor, northwest corner. Insertion by helicopter 12 kilometers out. Movement to target on foot. Breach during the 90-second window when guards rotated. Extract the target. Exfiltrate before dawn. Simple on paper. 1,000 ways to die in practice. The tablet contained a photograph. Recent. Taken through a window 3 weeks ago. Hawk. Thin. Gaunt. Beard long and unkempt. Eyes hollow, but alive. Reese stared at the image. Let it burn into her memory. Let it fuel the fire building in her chest. "I'm coming, Callum. Hold on." The landing zone was a dry riverbed 12 kilometers from target. The helicopter touched down at 2300 local time, rotors kicking up clouds of dust. Reese was out before the skids fully settled. Ghost and Wraith flanked her, weapons ready. They moved in tactical formation, 3 shadows flowing across the desert. No lights, no sound. Just boots on sand and the countdown of a mission clock. The terrain was hostile. Rocky outcroppings, sudden ravines, sand that shifted underfoot. Reese led the way. Her body remembered this, the way to move through darkness, the way to read terrain by starlight. But her body also remembered other things. The bullet that had collapsed her lung, the shrapnel in her leg, the months of rehabilitation. She pushed through the pain, let it fuel her. Hours passed, the moon rose and set, and then they reached the compound. It was exactly as the imagery showed. Small, crude, guard towers at each corner, spotlights sweeping in predictable patterns. But something felt wrong. The compound was too quiet, too few guards visible, the patterns too perfect. Reese raised her hand. The team stopped. Something's off. Her voice was barely audible. Too quiet, too clean. Ghost studied the compound through his scope. Could be shift change. Could be, but the hair on her neck was standing up. Stay sharp. They waited, watched the guards rotate, timed the spotlight sweeps. 90 seconds. That's all they had. The window opened at 0200. Go! They moved. The wall was over in 3 seconds. Inside, they split according to plan. Ghost and Wraith to neutralize guards while Reese made for the main building. She reached the door, picked the lock in 4 seconds, slipped inside. The hallway was dark, silent. It smelled of dust and despair. She moved like a ghost, clearing corners, ascending the stairs. The room was at the end of the hall. Heavy padlock on the door. 6 seconds to pick it. She pushed the door open, and there he was. Callum Brennan, Hawk, 3 years older, 30 pounds lighter, wrists chained to the wall. But when the door opened, his eyes snapped alert. The eyes of a warrior who had never stopped fighting. Phoenix. His voice was a ragged whisper. I knew you'd come. Reese crossed the room, knelt beside him. Her hands worked on the chains while her eyes never left his face. We're getting you out. Her voice cracked. Can you walk? I can try. A ghost of a smile. That's all I've been doing for 3 years. The first chain fell, then the second. Hawk slumped forward. Reese caught him. Ghost, Wraith. She keyed her radio. Package secured. Beginning extraction. Copy. Clear on our end. Move to exfil. They made it down the stairs, through the hallway, out the door. The compound was quiet. Guards neutralized. Way clear. Too easy. Reese felt it before she saw it. The wrongness. The trap closing around them. They were halfway to the wall when the lights came on. Spotlights blazed. Sirens wailed. Armed men poured from every building. Dozens of them. More than intelligence had predicted. Contact. Ghost's voice crackled. Multiple hostiles. All directions. It's a trap. They knew we were coming. A trap. They had let them breach. Let them reach the target. And now the jaws were closing. Reese's mind raced. They were outnumbered. Outgunned. Caught in the open with a wounded man. The extraction point was 200 meters away. The helicopter wouldn't arrive for 7 minutes. 7 minutes might as well be 7 years. Wraith, cover fire. Her voice was calm. Ghost, get to the extraction point. Call in the bird. Phoenix, no. Ghost's voice was sharp. That's suicide. That's an order. She pushed Hawk toward him. Get him out. Whatever it takes. I'll hold them here. Their eyes met. Everything that needed to be said passed without words. Don't die. Hawk's voice was barely audible. His hand gripped hers. Not for me. I'm not planning on it. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Now go. They went. Ghost supporting Hawk, Wraith laying cover fire. 2 shadows disappearing into the chaos. Reese turned to face the advancing enemy and became what she had always been, a warrior. The firefight lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of controlled bursts and tactical retreats. 7 minutes of drawing fire away from her team. She moved through the compound like a ghost, using cover, conserving ammunition, making every shot count. The enemy couldn't pin her down, couldn't predict her movements. She was wounded twice, shoulder, thigh, blood soaked her uniform. But she didn't stop. Her magazine ran dry. She slammed in a fresh one, kept firing, another magazine, then another. The enemy kept coming, and she kept killing them. But there were too many, and she was running out of time. Her last magazine was half empty when she heard it. The thunder of rotors, the roar of mounted guns. The helicopter had arrived. Phoenix, move! Ghost's voice screamed in her ear. Now! She ran. Bullets stitched the ground behind her. Something burned across her ribs. She reached the wall, vaulted over, sprinted toward the hovering aircraft. Hands reached down, strong hands. Hawk's hands. They pulled her aboard. The helicopter banked hard, climbed into the sky. The compound fell away beneath them. Reese collapsed against the bulkhead. Her body was screaming. Her wounds were bleeding. but she was alive. And beside her, Callum Brennan was alive too. "You're insane." His voice was weak but warm. "You know that?" Reese laughed. The sound surprised her. "Welcome back." "Hawk? Welcome back yourself." He reached out. She took his hand, felt the warmth of life in his grip. "Phoenix." The helicopter carried them toward safety, toward home. Dawn was breaking over Fort Braxton when they touched down. Medical teams rushed to take Hawk. Their urgent voices faded as they wheeled him toward the hospital. Reese watched him go, exhaustion finally catching up. But before he disappeared through the doors, he turned, met her eyes. "Thank you." The words were barely audible, but she heard them. She nodded once. That was enough. Colonel Hollis met her on the tarmac. His face showed relief and something deeper. "Welcome home, Senior Chief." "Good to be home, sir. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery, thanks to you." Reese shook her head. "Thanks to the team. I just did my part." Hollis studied her. The blood on her uniform, the bandages on her wounds, the fire still burning in her eyes. "The instructor position is still available. Whenever you're ready." She looked across the base, at the training yards where everything had changed, at the sky brightening with promise. 3 years ago, she had come here to disappear, to become nobody. But some things couldn't stay buried. Some fires couldn't be extinguished. "I think I'm ready now," Hollis smiled. "Then let's get started." 3 weeks later, Reese stood before a new class of trainees. Hawk sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the training yard, still recovering, but alive, present, watching her with pride in his eyes. The trainees looked at her with awe, with respect, with the particular reverence reserved for legends. She looked back at them with something else, with hope, with purpose. "My name is Senior Chief Reese Thornton." Her voice carried across the yard. "I served with SEAL Team 4 for 9 deployments. I've done things most people will never know about. I've lost friends. I've been wounded. I've faced death more times than I can count." She paused. Let the words sink in. "But I'm not here to tell you about that. I'm here to teach you something more important." The trainees leaned forward. "Strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about never leaving anyone behind." She met their eyes one by one. "That's what makes a warrior, not the uniform, not the weapons, the willingness to stand when everyone else has fallen." The morning sun climbed higher. Its light caught the edge of a challenge coin in her pocket, the one with Hawk's name on the back. Far away, in a building that didn't exist, a woman called Shepard watched a satellite feed of Fort Braxton. She performed exceptionally. Her aide stood beside her. Both operators extracted. Mission success. "She always does." Shepard closed the feed. "Begin preparations for Phase 2. The other candidates? They're ready when she is." Shepard turned from the screen. "Phoenix is just the beginning." The feed went dark, and somewhere in Fort Braxton, a woman who had been invisible for 3 years stood in the morning light, teaching the next generation what it meant to be a warrior. The easy days were over, but the easy days had never been the point. She was Phoenix, and she had finally come home.